Hey everyone, welcome to the 254th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a stellar show for you this week. We're going to be talking about new Google Glass, a new smart home hub that actually sounds kind of cool, an additional smart home hub that's going to work with your Nest stuff. And Kevin discovered something surprising about Ring. It has to do with surveillance, y'all. All right. We've got some news about the Pine 64 board in industrial settings. We've got some Google updates, and MIT has done some really cool research on RF signaling. Plus, a little bit of security news, and we're going to talk about Google's hardware margins, theoretical hardware margins. We're also going to hear from our sponsor, DigiCert, about IoT in the medical world, and our guest this week is Demian Pimentel, who's an electrical engineer with a company called Pleasant. They've actually released a new product called Paranoid that makes your smart speaker work without invading your privacy. All this and more. Let's kick it off with a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Very. Are you looking for an IoT development team who's been there, done that? Very's award-winning full-service IoT development firm will work with you to deliver your IoT solution on time and on budget. Learn more at www.verypossible.com. That's www.verypossible.com. Okay, Kevin, Google Glass, it's back. And
is
better than ever, and for the enterprise.
It is for the enterprise, yes. So last May, Google actually announced the Google Glass version 2 specifically for enterprise. And if you are a developer and you would like to make Google Glass apps with the new hardware, you can now order your own Google Glass V2. There are 3 different vendors that you can purchase from, and I checked the pricing. It's basically $1,062 to $1,199, depending on if you purchase from CDW, Mobile Advance, or SHI. I haven't heard much lately about Google Glass. In fact, I just was going through my closet and found the old original Google Glass, and I was wondering who is really using this, because we've talked so much about HoloLens, and in fact, you've tried that, right?
I did. I tried the HoloLens. Well, I was going to ask you to tell everybody what Google Glass has, because in the industrial space, there's several different types of heads-up displays. Some of them, like HoloLens, are very AR focused, and some of them are a little bit less AR focused.
Right.
So what does Google Glass offer?
For people who are familiar with the original Google Glass, this is going to be a rehash because there's not any major changes. Basically, this is, you're correct, more of an AR type app with a small prismatic lens at the top right of your eyes, and it has a speaker, a battery that should hopefully get you through a day. There's a multi-touch gesture trackpad on the right side of the temple, and then we've got Bluetooth 5, 802.11ac, Wi-Fi, and a much better camera, which is really what threw people off in the consumer space, but is certainly useful in enterprise. It's an 8 megapixel camera now on the new Google Glass.
Oh, wow. That's really nice.
Yeah. In fact, they beefed up a lot. This now has USB-C connectivity. It's got 32 gig of flash memory. It's got 3 beamforming microphones. I don't believe the original one did. A 3-axis I'm going to get this wrong. Magnetometer.
Oh, I can never say that word. I'm with you.
And I can say this other word, a 6-axis accelerometer and gyroscope. So basically, it's going to look very much like the original Google Glass on the outside, but it does have some new bells and whistles and improvements. Actually, a lower cost, too, because when we bought Google Glass, I think it was like $1,400. Yeah, $1,500. Yep.
And how long ago was that?
I believe that was like 2013, 2014 at the latest.
Yeah. Okay. I was really a while back. This concept's been around for a long time, and we're only now starting to see people really use it. And surprisingly, it's not in the consumer space. Although,
well, if it didn't have a camera, it might have been in the consumer space.
That's true. So if you are in the enterprise, you want to mess around with AR and build applications for things like, I don't know, helping in the HoloLens. I've seen them being used to like help teach people how to like do wiring or
repairing schematics. Yeah.
Any of that. And then also I've seen things like RealWear has a heads up display that also takes in voice, and they use that to actually talk to the machines. So like you communicate with the machines via voice, which is kind of interesting. So there's lots of options out there. If you're looking for something like this, maybe play around and see if you want to build for Google Glass version 2. Okay, the FCC. We have some information on a new smart home hub made by Craftsman, which is owned by Stanley Black & Decker, the tool company. And I'm going to give a shout out to Jimmy Hawkins, who spotted this from the FCC. We went and checked it out. And this is actually really a compelling looking home hub.
And it is a home hub because it does have all the major radios. You have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Zigbee, Z-Wave, and 4G capability, LTE for backup connectivity. It's got everything there. And we won't know about the software experience until we actually see this product debut.
Yeah, and the labeling on it says it's like a 13-piece home security kit, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, there are actually 3 different labels. One is for a 5-piece, one for an 8-piece, and one for a 13-piece. So that's kind of strange to me that you have hubs that are kind of limited to certain numbers of devices.
Maybe the 5-piece is
a product set that you buy.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's either product set, because if the hub has all the radios, I was going to say maybe if you're not including sensors, like a 13-piece might include sensors, and thus you need Z-Wave and Zigbee. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like maybe it's a 5-piece has 2 webcams and a doorbell. I don't know. I'm just making things up here, and then the other one has lots more sensors. That makes sense.
So the thing to note here is Stanley Black & Decker it's hugely innovative in the corporate parent company making IoT work for job sites and construction sites. They have a connected tool for professionals service and a hub that actually tracks tools around a job site. So that's part of their expertise. They also own Hugs, which is the security system that a lot of hospitals use to prevent you from taking your baby out of the hospital maternity ward. I don't know how many of y'all have had babies recently, but they put this bracelet device on the infant's foot and they tie that to your room and they have alarm sensors around the ward. So if you take the baby out, an alarm goes off. And this is hugely
popular. The baby back.
They send people after you so they can get that baby back. So they have a history of building connected products that are actually in use in the world today and have been for a while. So, and the other thing to note is Craftsman is Sears brand. And Sears does not make this stuff anymore. Stanley Black & Decker brought it a while back. But that's a really interesting place to see another retailer getting into the smart home. I don't know.
Yeah, no argument. I mean, we don't have, as consumers, we don't have a lot of hub choices. We've talked about Wink and SmartThings over the past couple of years, and then you've got the Amazon Echo Plus has one of the Z radios. Zigbee does not have Z-Wave. There's some others out there with add-on sticks and whatnot for the other radios. But it's always good to have another choice. I agree.
All right. So we'll keep our eyes open for that. Usually you go to the FCC pretty soon before you're about to release. So we'll see. All right. In other Home Hub news, Kevin, you found the Starling Home Hub, which is really interesting and probably will appeal to lots of people.
Yes. So if you are a HomeKit user, you do not have access or compatibility to your Nest devices. However, there is a project called the Homebridge Nest Project. And out of that project, a company named Starling has created the Starling Home Hub commercial product. It's $89. And literally, it bridges your HomeKit device or house with any Nest devices that you have. That's actually quite amazing. It's a small little device that you plug in, has a USB port, and it has an Ethernet jack. There's no Wi-Fi on this thing, so you do need a hardwired connection. But once you set it up, and they say it takes all of 2 minutes, you then, in your Apple Home app, can view all of your Nest products. And by all, I mean all, like the thermostats, temp sensors, the Protect, the indoor-outdoor IQ cams, the Hello Doorbell, the Nest Secure. You get access to everything. And aside from seeing all that on your iPhone, your iPad, you can voice control them using Siri. So you could say, I won't say it, but I'll say, hey, S, set the temperature to whatever degrees. And if you have a Nest on this device, it will work.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah. Live audio, video from Nest cameras. I mean, I don't see any diminished functionality here. Like, it seems like you're getting everything that you have with a Nest Google compatible product.
Huh. I wonder how Google feels about this.
I do wonder about that, but we'll find out. I will say this, 9 to 5 Mac covered this. And as a result of the coverage on the Starling page to order this, it is now back ordered due to high demand because of that coverage. If you order today, the day we're recording the show, there's no shipments coming out until Monday, March 2nd.
Okay. Let's talk about things that we don't want to be talking about, namely Ring and its ongoing issue with surveillance. The Ring, now owned by Amazon, makes the smart doorbell and a variety of lighting and other home security stuff, primarily for outdoor spaces. Well, we've been talking about them for, it feels like months. And basically the big issue that came up probably the end of last year was that Ring had paired up with police departments to co-market the devices. And as part of that, you could easily upload footage from your Ring camera to police departments. Police departments could offer discounts on Ring gear, which I felt was really kind of questionable. This idea of turning police departments that we're supposed to trust into sales agents for a private company. But the other issue that people had is, hey, police can get access to cameras from anybody walking around your neighborhood if you have the Ring cameras, and it just felt a little creepy.
I thought you were going to start with the good news first, but you went down the bad road.
Well, I wanted to level set. So
yes.
To answer this problem, Ring has created the Control Center. They actually announced this. Amazon announced this back in September, but it's finally out. And with that, you can say, hey, police, I don't want you pulling my video. I don't even want you requesting my video. But there's kind of still a downside. This feels like window dressing. Kevin, you want to explain why?
Yeah. So as you said, there's a video request option in here about sharing your videos with the police. And first of all, if you disable video requests so that the police cannot request or get your video, that's only from video going forward from the time you turn it off, because anything you've already shared, any videos you've shared in the Ring Neighbors app, police have access to. So that's not going to change the past. It does change the future. What I also thought was interesting is there's a way in the app, and I do not have the app, by the way. I got rid of my Ring, not for this reason, but for other reasons about 18 months ago. And I use a Nest Hello Doorbell. But in the app, you can see if your local police department is participating with Ring as part of the program that you had just mentioned, Stacey. Well, it turns out they actually have a Google map that lists all of the quote-unquote neighbors law enforcement partnerships. And lo and behold, unbeknownst to me until I checked it, my police station is part of the Ring partnership. I did not know that. And I kind of have two problems with this. One is something we just discussed last week when discussing smart cities. When you're out and about in public in a quote-unquote smart city, or my area, I would say smart sticks, because I live out in the sticks, there's no terms of service. There's no, I agree to be videoed by private cameras and have it go to the publicly funded police department. So I have that issue. Additionally, I went to my local police station's website and I checked and double checked, and there's no mention of this Ring partnership. And that bothers me even more, quite honestly.
Yeah. So every Ring doorbell you pass could conceivably send images of you to the police department if requested. And right now, Ring does not do image recognition, but they do have researchers on staff dealing with facial recognition.
And the list of partnerships, we have a post about this at the Control Center as well, because there is, as I said, good news as well here. the list is much longer than I thought. And some of these police departments actually, the first ones for the partnership go back to March of 2018. And I don't think we knew about that publicly back then.
We didn't. We started finding out about this in the middle of last year. But since then, they've been adding a lot of new police departments, even as soon as, or even as recent as in January. So, woof.
Yes.
And it's not just police departments. I should also say it's like county sheriff departments. So your
Correct.
local police department, or it might be your county sheriff department that has access to this, which is doubly problematic.
I think we have to give a shout out, though, in terms of the control center. The first option in there is to enable two-factor authentication.
Yay!
And I love that. Kudos to Ring, Amazon Ring, however you want to say it. Very good, because that should be available as an option for all of our devices, in my opinion.
Yes, because Ring's other problem is that people basically had been reusing their passwords, and their passwords got hacked somewhere and then posted, and people tested that against Ring, and people could hack into people's Ring's cameras.
And watch whatever you're doing.
And talk to their kids. Nobody likes when people talk to your kids.
No.
Especially because hackers are not usually warm and fuzzy to children. They're usually pretty crude, racist, and generally jerkish people.
Yes.
So, okay, let's talk about industrial compute boards. Woo! There is a new one. So there is the Raspberry Pi 4 came out a while back last year, and it was highly ruggedized, designed to be fatter, better, and badder for industrial IoT use. Well, Pine 64, which is another company, or it's another board out there, I have one, they are releasing the Hard Rock 64 that is coming out in April, and it is going to compete against the Raspberry Pi 4. Oh, it's the Raspberry Pi 4B. So the Hard Rock 64 is going to have really a ton of processing power. This is pretty good. It's got 2 ARM Cortex A72 cores and 4 Cortex A53 cores. Those are server class, communications class kind of chips right there. It's also going to have a Mali GPU. It's got Wi-Fi. It'll have Bluetooth. It'll have roughly the same amount of RAM. And the board is going to cost between $35 and $55, depending on how much RAM you need. And if you're looking at the Pi 4, maybe you want to check out the Pine 64. I will say the one downside of when I do have a Pine 64, the one downside of having chosen that over a Pi for this particular project I chose was that there wasn't a lot or as large of a community. So there wasn't as much documentation ready-made or the ability to like just cut and paste code into there, just because it's a less common board. So that's something to think about. But
I would also keep in mind that it appears that this board will run hotter than a Raspberry Pi. You may need a heat sink on this, but
it's true. My Pine 64 does run hot.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're living if you've got it in a cold spot, or
go into your data center and prototype.
Yeah. Bring it into your data center. Or I was going to say, there's always that person who's got a space heater under their desk. Maybe you just strap them some Pine 64s and you're like, instead of a space heater, we're going to give you
compute and heat.
Exactly. I've actually seen startups that do that. Every year at CES, there's a company that does that. They do distributed computing as part of a heating system. Yay. Exciting news for people who lose things. Google Assistant now works with Tile to find your lost stuff. So basically, if you are a Google Assistant user, you can say, hey, G, where is my purse? That's assuming that you've labeled your Tile purse. And it will tell you. Yay. If the item is in the house, the assistant will try to use Tile's Bluetooth to say they were seen near the kitchen speaker or near the Office 2 hub. If it's not in Bluetooth range, it will just try to give you the last known location. This is nice. So
it is nice.
I feel like they've had this with the Amazon for a while.
Right. And they mentioned this back in September that this was coming. It's the partnership anyway. So now this is, legit and available, which is good. I'm curious how many, it's kind of a different market entirely. I would imagine not too many iOS users have Google Home products in their house, and we keep hearing about Apple's ultra wideband tags with better accuracy than Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. So,
oh yes, but that's not this, so we won't worry about
no.
that. Basically, everybody's trying to get in the tag space. Even Google is actually, they have tag information. They don't as part of their SDKs, but they don't have any tags yet. So we'll see if maybe Tile finds a buyer. I don't know. Okay, let's talk about RF. MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab, CSAIL, they have basically created something they call RF Focus. It is a smart surface that uses an array of more than 3,000 antennas to boost your signal strength by a factor of 10 and the channel capacity by a factor of 2. So, oh my gosh, what does that mean? It means you can send twice as much data 10 times farther.
Yep.
Which is kind of a big deal. Obviously, this is something that is not, this is research. It's
experimental.
It also requires this like super focused surfacing area. Are we going to be painting this on walls? No, because it requires a software controller. But it's still really interesting because we do need the carrying capacity is what's so interesting to me, because basically we have limited airwaves. We're getting better at using the airwaves we have, but anything that helps basically cram more bits into our hertz is good.
Yep.
And this does that.
I wonder if they can figure out a way to build this inside of walls, because the way this works, as I understand it, it's smart enough to know what device it needs to send the bits to. And if the bits can be reflected off the wall to a device in the room, that's one thing. But does it go through the surface to a device in the other room? It almost looks like it does.
Yeah, I don't know. This is, go look at this. It's neat.
It is neat. It is neat.
And it would not be a podcast if we didn't have a security flaw to talk about. So let's talk about Philips Hue. Oh, we were sad about our light bulbs getting hacked. Talk to me, Kevin.
Yes. Now, just so everybody knows, this has already been patched. However, if you weren't aware or you haven't upgraded your Hue bulbs to the January 13th firmware, I believe, you could be at risk of letting a hacker put malware into your house. This was not good. This has to do with Zigbee, because those smart bulbs are Zigbee based. And essentially, if you had, or when you had bulbs that were susceptible to this hack, somebody with a laptop and a Zigbee antenna could essentially unpair your bulb from the network and put some malicious code into the bulb's firmware. And then if you as a user don't know this and put your bulb back on the network, now you've opened up the door.
Ta-da!
Yeah, so just make sure.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. Yeah, keep your devices up to date.
That is always the moral of these lessons.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's talk about Google, or rather Alphabet. The company issued earnings this week, and we don't pay a lot of attention to how many billions it's making in the ad market. I will say it was notable because the company shared its YouTube business as a separate entity and its cloud business as a separate entity. So, woo! But we're here. We always listen for Nest and home hardware related stuff. And we found that not much has changed in terms of like the ability to tell what's going on. But Google did say it was a multi-billion-dollar business, to which we're like, okay, so more than $2 billion. Yay.
And hardware, just so we're clear, it's not broken out into these, the IoT products and the phones and the Chromebooks and all that. It's all lumped in.
Yes. So you've got Pixelbooks next to Google
Nest
Minis that are, Nest Minis that are getting, given away for free.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what we're here to talk about. So with this, Google said basically, hey, we sold a lot of Nest speakers. Yay. And they also sold a lot of the Pixel 3As, which I actually have one and I love that phone, but relatively inexpensive. So Google saw a decline in their hardware revenue. Most people are guessing that's because people did not buy the Pixel 4 phones.
And probably the Pixel Slate tablet, which came out last year.
Yes, very expensive, not necessarily awesome. So, and it's really hard to say when you're selling almost $1,000 phone next to a mini that you're giving away for free or selling for $30. It's really hard to make up.
It's really hard to tell. I mean, I'm sure they sell a lot of Google Home or Nest branded devices, but the average selling price of all their hardware is probably much lower than it should be because people aren't buying the expensive things. They're buying the less expensive things. And we don't know how many of those less expensive things.
And we also don't know the margins on these things.
Correct.
So it could be, hey, they're not making as much money, but it's highly profitable. I kind of doubt that given how many they're giving away. But we don't know a lot about Google's hardware business. We know it is apparently probably less than the cloud business, because once you get to where it has a material impact on revenue, you're supposed to break it out. So we're not there yet.
Right. One other interesting note, it doesn't mean as much as I'd like it to mean. Google said that the Google Assistant now basically has 500 million monthly active users, but that is across the smart speakers and smart displays, as well as Google's phones, Android TVs, cars, and anything else that works with Assistant. So I would love to see a mix of that to see how many are on the smart displays. But
betting it's cheap
speakers.
Smartphones.
It could be.
I am so cranky. Okay. Well, that's most of the news we've got this week, but it's time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline. Whoop whoop. It's a new month, which means we are announcing January's winner. And January's winner is Dan, who actually called in and had a question on the show about fans. Go, Dan. You win a Smart Dry device, which is a device that you'll pop into your dryer and it will tell you when your clothes are dry. It's quite handy, actually. I've saved lots of money and, well, maybe not lots of money, but I've saved money and energy by pulling out my clothes when they're actually dry. And maybe I've shrunk fewer things. I don't know. It does warn you when your delicate temperature is exceeded. So you get a Smart Dry. Yay, Dan. If you would like to win a prize for February, we're going to give away a Smart Things Hub. Woo woo! And to enter to win, all you have to do is give us a call at 512-623-7424 and leave us a question. We will answer it on the air, possibly, or maybe you'll just be entered to win. Either way, you should totally do it. A Smart Things Hub is fun and an integral part of any smart home. All right, that's enough for things you can win. Let's hear this week's question. This week's question is from Robert, and ironically, he already has a Smart Things Hub. Let's hear it.
Hi, my name is Robert. I've got a Smart Things home with many devices, both Z-Wave and Zigbee, but I have a problem where a lot of my Zigbee devices will drop off and I have to repair them frequently. Do you have any idea what's going on or why I need to do this often? What I can do to stop it from happening in the future? Thank you very much.
Okay, Robert, I have not enough information here to tell you exactly what's happening, but I do have some suggestions and things to consider. I'm sure you know this, but remember, Zigbee and Z-Wave devices can only be attached to one hub at a time. It doesn't sound like you have multiple ones, but if you pair them to multiple things, they will fall off the other network. I say this because it's something that people run into sometimes. My hunch is, because you have a lot of devices, is that maybe you need a repeater. If you add a repeater to your network, it might help. If you decide to add a repeater, you're going to want to reboot your SmartThings hub so it comes back on and creates the new network. You don't want to just add the repeater and just be like, okay, now it's fixed. You're going to have to actually let the network reconfigure. So those are some things that I would suggest.
But before you buy hardware, we have to talk about Zigbee's insecure rejoin feature.
The what? The what?
The what? The what? So, and this is kind of strange because it depends on if you're using the Samsung SmartThings Classic app or the new app. So there is a support page on SmartThings about insecure rejoin, or it's sometimes called unsecure rejoin, depending on who you're talking to. It is optional. There are pros and cons. But what's interesting is that if you disable insecure rejoin, you're protecting your Zigbee network from certain vulnerabilities. So that's a good thing. The cons are Zigbee devices may drop off your network and become unresponsive, which is a description of the issue that you're telling us about. So maybe, just maybe, you are not using insecure rejoin. If you want to disable it, you do that. They call it secure mode in the app, secure mode on or secure mode off. So you've got to make a decision on if you want the most secure or the most compatible. And just so you know, the SmartThings Classic app, insecure rejoin is enabled by default. So it's a slightly different setting. You have to go into your app, tap the hub, tap Zigbee utilities, and there's a switch for insecure rejoin where you can turn it off if you'd like to. It's really goofy, to be quite honest, that they have it done two different ways with two different apps for the same hub. But
yes, and SmartThings, by the way, encourages everyone to move to the new app, not the classic app. So
yes,
there you go. The other thing I would say, so I'm pro repeaters because when you've got multiple RF networks running around, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, C-Wave, things do get a little wonky. And adding a repeater just makes the overall mesh stronger. You can try Kevin's suggestion, which is a good one. But I would also say pop another repeater in there and then also make sure they're plugged in and turned on. I would also go on the SmartThings forums just because they've got a lot of smart people. And there are known issues with certain devices, like old Osram light bulbs used to have a problem falling on and off Zigbee networks, and they would bring other things down as well. So I don't know what you have in your house, but you should also kind of double check the individual devices because some of them might be a problem.
And if a repeater is the best option, it's not going to be a huge expense. I was out on Amazon and see some for $15 to $20.
Yeah, a lot of your devices should already act as a repeater.
Yes.
But you may have like a huge cluster in one corner of the house and you may need to like stick something there. I don't know. Good luck to you, Robert. And remember, if you would like to be entered to win a SmartThings Hub, give us a call at 512-623-7424 and you could be entered to win. Also, we might answer your question. Kevin, quick question for you. Would you pay $49 for a device that attaches to your Amazon Echo or your Google Minis or Google Home devices and basically blocks their microphone until you talk to them?
I would not. I just use my mute switch.
Okay, well, there is a new device on the market from a company called Pleasant Software called Paranoid. This device will sit on those devices and flip the mute switch for you, or it will create like a interference frequency and it will say until you say Paranoid, turn on Madam A, and then it will turn on Madam A. If this sounds interesting to you, you'll want to hear from our guest, Demian Pimentel, who is an engineer with the company that has built this device. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is DigiCert, and I have Mike Nelson, who is VP of IoT Security, here to talk to us. So let's talk a little bit about healthcare, because healthcare is going to be a big focus for IoT in the coming year. There's lots of devices out there tracking people's health. There's lots of talk about building things that actually take action on people's health. So how prepared are healthcare providers and device makers for this evolution?
It's kind of a mixed basket answer, I hate to say, but I think that we're definitely trending in the right direction. We see responsible activity happening with both healthcare providers in securing the entire ecosystem and all the connected devices that they're bringing into their system. But we also see on the other side, manufacturers taking more responsibility and doing things before they ship the device to the hospital to make sure that security protections are there. But we still have a long ways to go.
And data protection is not just important, it's the law when it comes to healthcare. What does IoT and healthcare mean from a data protection standpoint?
IoT and healthcare really means more data. More data is being generated on patient conditions, and that sensitive data is being sent back to doctors to make treatment decisions. And so with that increase of data privacy has always been important in healthcare, but the volume of data is growing, and it's growing at a rapid pace. And so the privacy of that data and using things like encryption and whatnot continues to be really important. With IoT, the other critical aspect of data is the integrity of the data, knowing that the values are accurate. So when a doctor is making a treatment decision for a patient and the data that he's using has been generated from a device, how do you know that that data has not been manipulated as it's been transferred from point A to point B, and making sure that you can trust that data?
All right. And what can manufacturers do to prevent these attacks and ensure that the data is authentic?
Yeah, I think in most of the attacks that we see, there's really three common vulnerabilities. Lack of authentication, and that can be bad password management. That can be not authenticating back-end connections of a device to a server or a device to a mobile app. Lack of data encryption is another common vulnerability, and that's data both at rest and data in transit. And then the third one is manufacturers not doing integrity checks to make sure that the data is authentic, that it can be trusted. That's where DigiCert comes in. I call those things the essential cybersecurity hygiene for connected devices. Those three: authentication, encryption, and integrity. And public key infrastructure and the technology that DigiCert brings to the market helps manufacturers address those three issues.
And where can our listeners go to find out more about what DigiCert can do to help secure the Internet of Things in healthcare?
They can go to digicert.com, and we have a whole section on our website about IoT security for all industries, and we have one particularly targeted at healthcare.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Demian Pimentel, who is an electrical engineer with Pleasant Solutions, Inc. Hi Demian, how are you doing today?
Hello, Stacey. I'm doing great. Thank you. What about you?
I am excellent. So we are doing this because you guys this week at Pleasant released an interesting product called Paranoid, which is a product that I can add to any of my smart speakers in the home, and it will prevent them from listening in on my conversation. We're going to delve into how you guys do that. But first off, let's talk about why Pleasant picked this problem to solve and how it came about.
Pleasant is a company that has been focusing on security for a very, very long time, since its beginnings 12 years ago. I think it's a natural way to evolve for this company, to start developing products not only for business purposes, but also for consumers. So basically, well, I would say there's a big issue with all of those Internet of Things devices that potentially can spy on us. So could be smart speakers, TVs, and basically any device which has, let's say, a microphone or is able to record a video, or say even Google Maps that can track our location and things like that. So there is a huge need to develop products that are going to solve these privacy issues. So Paranoid is a solution that's going to allow people to use smart speakers in a safe manner, so in such a way that those companies are not going to be able to spy on us.
Okay, so you're starting with speakers, but it sounds like you have plans for other devices?
In the future, we may be releasing other devices as well, yes.
Okay, well, for now, let's stick with smart speakers. So y'all have three products. You have the Home Button. It sounds like it's a robot that physically pushes the button. You have the Home Wave, which is something that sits on a device and generates noise. And then you have the Paranoid Home Max, which I apparently have to send my device in to get this. So let's start with the Home Button. Explain to us how that works and what it would work with, please.
All right. I think it's a good idea to say that, well, all of those three devices have the same core. So they have different functions, but the core is the same. So the core of this device is what we call a Paranoid module. It's an electronic circuit board that's going to be basically listening to our conversation, but it's not going to be sending that information anywhere. And the reason why this device is going to be listening is to detect a wake word. So once we say that wake word, our devices are going to have an action or to produce an action that's going to let what we call the listener device, so it could be a smart speaker, basically to listen for commands. So Paranoid Home Button is, as you said, it's a robotic actuated device. So for the smart speakers that have a mute button, so our device is going to be waiting to listen for that wake word. And then when it listens that wake word, it's going to be pushing that button to unmute the device, which was muted at the beginning. Then the user is going to be able to send commands to that device. Well, after we determine that the user has finished sending commands to that device, the Paranoid module is going to push that button again to put the device into mute mode until the next wake word is detected.
And that works with things that have presumably buttons like the Amazon Echo and Dot. And what about things like my Google Home Mini? That doesn't have a physical button.
The Google Home Mini, well, they have a button, but it's a slider switch. So it's a slightly different configuration. One of the things that we found with those devices is that they always provide some feedback. So when you slide the switch, it's going to say something like microphone has been turned on, microphone has been turned off, which is quite annoying for lots of people. So that's why at this moment we cannot use Paranoid Home button or a similar approach with those devices. But we have other products that can be used with any devices such as Google Home or Amazon, which would be the Paranoid Home Wave and the Paranoid Home Max. So for the Wave, what we do is we basically jam the microphones with sound in such a way that whatever is being said, like let's say in the room, is going to be covered by white noise. So that way, even if the device is listening, the device is not able to, let's say, make an interpretation of what's going on because of the noise that's covering the sound in the room. The device works in a very, very similar way than Home button because it uses the same core. So when we say the wake word, it's going to stop creating that blocking sound or noise. Then the device is going to be able to be listening to the user, respond to commands, and then when the user has finished talking to the device the paranoid device is going to start producing that masking noise again so that our privacy is protected.
Okay. I love covering the Internet of Things because it combines the physical and the digital, right?
Yeah.
And this is actually a fairly common, I'll call it a hack in quotations, which is jamming microphones by producing a white noise that kind of cancels everything out. But this is not new technology. So my question is, what about this particular device and the way you guys are solving for this? Why couldn't someone else just release something very similar? Why couldn't Amazon or Google start doing this on their own, for example?
Well, basically, we have a very broad patent, actually, 2 of them, and we are working on more. And they basically cover all the details of what we are doing and much more than that. Now, one of the things that we implement with our products is that they have to be fully functional. So I would say there's several attempts from other people to do similar things, but they have not been done in the way that we are doing it, which is very efficient.
Okay, you have done some machine learning on the device itself, so you're basically having it understand. In many of these cases, you can choose more than one word. So it might be, we call her Madam A, but you might say that name, or you might say computer. Or in Google, you can say Google, or you can say, I think you can say some other things. So how much of that can you handle, or do you only have like 1 or 2 options?
All right. So at this moment, we are focusing on one single wake word, but the device, in the future, the device is going to be able to be configured to other choices as well. The user is going to have the ability to use his own voice to, let's say, retrain the algorithm in such a way that it's going to be more responsive to that voice. So yes, we're going to be able to do things like that. But for this first launch, it's going to be just a single word.
Okay. And then do you have to plug this into the wall next to it? What are kind of as a user, what can I expect? And I should say this is a $49 device.
So for Paranoid Home button and Wave, which are devices that are connected externally, so they are mounted on top of the smart speakers, then we are going to have an external power supply. Now, for Paranoid Home Max that goes connected inside, we're going to take power from the same device. Now, we haven't talked about Paranoid Home Max yet.
I just realized that. I was like, we should talk about it because it is, of all the options, the most intriguing, but it looks to be the most unformed at the yet so far. So tell us what that is.
All right. Let me start by saying this. We spent lots of time figuring out how those smart speakers work, how the signals are communicated, like from the microphone to the processors and so on. And so we found the way to basically interrupt that microphone signal. So either killing it or interrupting it would be like similar thing. So the beauty about this is that when we do that, we are 100% sure that we are not allowing the smart speaker to listen anything. Why? Because we are basically taking control over the microphone. So it's not like superposing some noise or pushing the mute button or something like that. It's basically going into the inner workings of the device and cutting the signal just at the right point.
And this is actually something that Amazon has said it does in its Echo devices. When I physically switch the microphone off, they say that it actually turns off the electronic circuit.
Well, I cannot comment on what Amazon or Google or other companies are doing, but there's two different ways to, let's say, mute the microphone. So one of them would be I have a button or a slider switch that's actually going to cut the signal path between the microphone and the processor. So that way I could physically verify that there's no signal going through. Right? So that's the best approach, I would say, because that's the one that will provide more privacy. Now, there's other way to do things is I connect that mute button to the processor. So the processor is going to detect that I want to mute the device. And then the processor is going, basically to cut the microphones. But at some point, we lose control over that because we don't know what the processor is doing, right? That's why cutting the microphone signal is what we should be doing.
So we do that, but to do that, I have to actually physically mail my device to you. What is the process of having this done going to look like?
Yeah, well, because those devices would need to be opened by a qualified technician. So yes, people who wanting to purchase that option would need to send those devices, let's say, to a tech center where those devices would be modified. The Paranoid module would be attached to them. And then the devices would be shipped back to the customers with the Paranoid module installed.
Got it. And so I'm looking at paying the shipping. How much would something like that be?
The cost for any option would be $49.
And the idea is you're going to licensed service centers around the US?
And Canada, yes.
And Canada. So is that like a Best Buy, or what is that going to look like?
I don't have the details about that part.
Okay, so back to technical details. So we've talked about how this is done, but part of this that I find most confusing is people are worried that these things are always listening, but they're not. They're just listening for the wake word, and they don't start recording or sending what you've asked until you say the wake word. So it feels like what you're doing is nice, but it's kind of, you're solving a problem that doesn't really exist?
Well, according to many reports that we have, and that they are included in the press release, well, there's many reports of those companies basically recording and listening and saying that they basically keep the information and so on. So I won't be so sure about that.
Are you talking about things like mistaken? Like when I say a word and they think I've talked to them, but I haven't? Or are we talking about just they're broadly listening in? I know that there have been reports, but some of those are not. It's like they don't understand how these work.
Yeah, but I think the most important thing for people is to know that their privacy is protected no matter what. The only thing that I can tell you is that, well, the way those companies have been, those tech giants have been handling our information, I would say it's not reasonable, and then they haven't been doing or taking the right approach or steps to let us know that they are willing to protect our privacy. I would say it's just the other way around.
Okay. And has Pleasant ever released a consumer-oriented product before? I know it's a software development shop.
Yes, that's right. We have worked on products for our clients, but we have not launched a product of our own before. So this would be the first time.
In the consumer market and also the first hardware, or have you done hardware for your clients as well?
We have done hardware as well.
Okay. When can people buy this?
They can start pre-ordering after we release the product to the public, and we have a shipping date of 6 to 8 weeks, depending on the volume of sales that we get.
Okay, and I think that's it. Demian, thank you so much for coming on the show this week.
You're welcome, Stacy. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.